My sense is that many Blue Lock fans, and for a long time that's very much included myself as well, mainly treat the third selection as a setup arc for the U20 match. It's a short stint to establish some new characters and key concepts that will prove important down the line. And while that's of course all very much the case, I do believe that treating these 20 odd chapters as nothing more than that is selling the third selection short tremendously. So what I want to do in this video is explore Blue Lock's third story arc on its own terms, as a piece of storytelling with distinct themes and concerns, without recourse to any subsequent manga events, and show that the third selection is a really fascinating arc in its own right, and offers some crucial character moments to boot. That being said, I'm sure many of you will understand the ramifications of this analysis for events further down the line. One more thing. I won't tolerate any complaining about Season 2 of the anime in the comments. Full disclosure, I've never watched the anime, so I genuinely don't care about the whole debacle. Nevertheless, it makes me tremendously sad that the ceaseless whinging and moaning about animation quality is drowning out any substantial discussion about the actual story, character writing, and messaging of the third selection. Therefore, anyone who brings up PNGs, PowerPoint and the like is getting an instant shadow ban from the channel. No exceptions. There are plenty of spaces on the internet for entitled kids to whine about a thing you're probably not even paying for, not living up to your standards, but my comment section won't be one of them. Anyways, back to your regular scheduled content. To understand how the third selection contributes to Blue Lock's overall narrative, I want to start by looking into the fundamental differences in the qualities that are sought after in the third selection compared to the previous ones. If we take all three arcs together, it becomes quite apparent that there's a clear progression baked into the structure of the Blue Lock selections. The first selection serves to awaken the latent egos of the Blue Lock candidates. The teachings of the second selection then are twofold. First, it requires them to demonstrate their individual strength, and secondly, they must leverage their ability to spark chemical reactions with their teammates. This is of course a bit of a simplification, but it should suffice for the purposes of this video. That brings us to the next stage, that is the third selection. This time around, there's a very concrete problem that needs to be addressed. Our cast is set to face off against Japan's national under-20 team as a motley crew comprised of only strikers. In other words, Blue Lock's current predicament forces them to adapt to circumstances that are both unforeseen and wildly unfavourable. Yet, failure to navigate the shift in tide will spell the end of their football careers. These are the factors that give rise to the specific structure of the third selection. Essentially, the Blue Lockers need to demonstrate their ability to adapt. And that's why, here more than ever, they're thrust into a selection procedure that's deeply disadvantageous in every facet of its design. This becomes especially apparent when comparing it to the previous arcs. The third selection is the most cutthroat yet, in that it allows for absolutely no second chances, no time to reflect and regroup. If Isagi and his peers fail to prove their value in their one match, that's it. Moreover, there's another major point of contrast with the preceding arc. The second selection places great emphasis on the importance of picking the right teammates, those with which you can maximize your chemistry. And we see the various teams gradually perfecting their synergies throughout the arc. The third selection, on the other hand, jumbles the Blue Lock candidates together into teams of complete strangers who must carve out a space for themselves on the spot. What's being tested here is no longer if they can create high-level chemical reactions, but rather their ability to improvise on the fly. Now, in all fairness, adaptability is a somewhat nebulous concept, so I think Kaneshiro rightly broke it down into two more concrete sub-elements: assertion and coexistence. To stand a chance against the U20 team, the Blue Lock candidates must showcase that they can both slot into an existing dynamic while also elevating and even surpassing it with their own skill sets. So with all that in mind, let's have a look at which characters are highlighted in this specific arc. Blue Lock is a story that's highly conscientious about what its various characters represent, and deliberately inserts specific figures at appropriate story junctions, and the third selection is no exception. In that light, it's striking that the third selection is the only arc in Blue Lock to feature a second major POV character in Reo Mikage. That's of course not to say that the story is never told from the perspective of its secondary cast, but it's entirely unique for a full match to be focalized from Reo's perspective. And more than that, the arc begins with the crucial scene that explicitly parallels the dilemma faced by Isagi with Reo's predicament. In other words, we don't just get to view the arc's second match from Reo's viewpoint because he happens to be around. Rather, his character has been positioned as an integral element of the arc from its very onset. That of course raises the question why Reo of all characters is the one to serve as Isagi's main counterpart for the arc. For that, we have to explore what the dynamic between them represents within Blue Lock's philosophical fabric so far. This is something I've discussed in more detail in other videos, but the core of the second selection's messaging about chemistry between players comes about through its exploration of the two duos of Isagi and Bachira, and Nagi and Reo. And throughout the arc, we're constantly invited to compare and contrast these four players. So here's where it gets interesting within the thematic context of the third selection. If we're invited to specifically compare Isagi and Reo, the main axis on which they're juxtaposed in the previous arc is actually in their ability to adapt. Yoichi Isagi, the purported genius of adaptability, versus Reo Mikage, the spurned partner who's struggling to accept change. And as a result, one ends up as the player who doesn't get chosen, while the other is calling the shots. Yet, despite all his achievements and progression throughout the second selection, Isagi ultimately fell short against Rin. He's still unable to surpass the ostensibly fathomless well of talent that is Blue Lock's number one. More concretely, Rin unveils that Isagi's preconceptions about football are fundamentally misguided. So in other words, the gulf between them is not just a matter of raw abilities, but boils down to a shortcoming in Isagi's very mindset. So if he wants to have any shot at defeating Rin, he has to adapt and reconstruct every facet of his thinking. That's what brings us to the critical meeting between Isagi and Reo at the start of the third selection. At this point, Isagi has been presented with a fork in the road. Will he elect a tried and tested partnership, or gamble on a situation that will force him to change and adapt? And right when he's stuck on his decision, he runs into the player who most clearly embodies what happens if you fail to adapt, grappling with the exact same issue. So right when Reo confesses that he's uncertain if he has it in him to stand side by side with the new and improved Nagi, Isagi realizes that he has to embrace change. And with that, our protagonist has taken the first step to face the challenges of the third selection. Now, I want to talk about the two phases of adaptation for a second, before we move to the matches. Immediately prior to the meeting with Reo, Isagi encounters his two oldest rivals in the series, Barou and Niko. There's a fascinating interplay between these two characters within the context of the first selection that they'll probably discuss in detail sometime down the line. But long story short, Barou represents everything that Isagi lacks at that point, whereas Niko presents Isagi with an opportunity to almost view himself from an outside perspective. And what's interesting in Isagi's encounters with these two figures in the third selection is that each of them embodies one of the principal qualities that Ego seeks out in this arc. Barou is confident that he will pass the selection by asserting his value, whereas Niko focuses on finding an environment for himself to best demonstrate that he can coexist with the top 6. So to put it differently, the two central qualities of the arc are personified by the two paradigms that during the earliest stages of the story molded Isagi into the player he is today. And that reinforces the central idea that adaptation involves asserting yourself and finding ways to coexist with your teammates in equal measure. So now we reach the actual selection, and what I want to focus on is how these principles of assertion and coexistence are explored throughout its matches. First, we witness Isagi's struggle to demonstrate his worth when he's thrust in the midst of the absolute monsters that are Rin and Shidou. But let's first talk about the competing teams themselves, and more specifically, the way the story juxtaposes them to each other. These makeshift teams are spearheaded by two pairs that couldn't differ any further. The most potent duo in all of Blue Lock versus Star Strikers who are fundamentally incompatible. In that sense, Karasu and Otoya seem to perfectly embody the principles of assertion and coexistence. Each of them showcase top-tier individual abilities, yet where they truly shine is in their mutually reciprocal playstyles. Meanwhile, each of Rin and Shidou's goals throughout the match are born from purely individual talent, or rather, even seem to be brought about in spite of their teammates' efforts. When Rin sees Shidou run in to receive a pass, he instead uses him to create a blind spot for himself to score. Next, Shidou appears to be setting up a post play, only for him to invalidate Isagi's efforts with a high-level drive shot. Or think of Rin managing to score exactly because Isagi failed to reach the ball on time. In essence, Isagi's seemingly impossible challenge in this match is finding a way to assert himself among players who are fundamentally uninterested in coexisting with their teammates. These struggles are exacerbated even further by having Isagi face off against a player who specializes in laying bare the shortcomings of his opponents. Tabito Karasu's entire playstyle revolves around preventing his victims from asserting themselves by hunting them down relentlessly. So with all that, Isagi finds himself between a rock and a hard place. He's joined a team of two players who don't care about coexisting with others while facing off against a rival who won't let him assert his value. Now, let's turn to Isagi's counterpart in the other match, because Reo faces a very similar set of difficulties in his own way. Given their extensive history together, you'd expect that Reo would have a much easier time slotting in with Nagi than Isagi does with Rin. Furthermore, Reo has a concrete picture of how he will display the two values that Ego wants to draw out in this selection round. He'll be able to assert his value and coexist with the top 6 because he's the best at synergizing with Nagi. Yet, Reo finds himself unable to do either for the greater part of the match, and that's because his idea of assertion and coexistence isn't true adaptation. Where he has stagnated, Nagi has changed beyond recognition. Over the course of the match, Reo's greatest fears become reality. Nagi has sprinted ever further ahead, leaving his former partner back in the dust. More specifically, this match confronts Reo with his many limitations in face of extraordinary players. That's why the first one who shuts him down is none other than Ishikari, the tallest character in Blue Lock. In short, Reo is here forced to acknowledge that he can't measure up to his rivals in the most literal sense. That's the kind of team Reo is facing. It's got the greatest striker in all of Blue Lock, whose individual abilities outshine him on every front, assisted by 2 freaks of nature who can keep the ball out of reach of mere mortals. Moreover, Reo falls to the wayside within his own team in the early stages of the match. Just as how Rin and Shidou have no need for Isagi throughout the preceding game, Reo's team is spearheaded by the player with the best one-on-one abilities in all of Japan, meaning a player who has no need for someone like Reo to back him up. Instead, the kind of striker that Kenyu Yukimiya seeks out is someone who can mix in his own exceptional talents to elevate his teammates' plays even further. So to put it in terms of the arc's central concepts, this team only allows space for coexistence between players with an equal ability to assert themselves. Long story short, Isagi and Reo both struggle within a very similar status quo. Both of them hit their limits as mere mortals in the face of the various prodigies and freaks that have bubbled up during Blue Lock's selections. These are the walls they must scale to clear a selection that tests their ability to adapt to unfamiliar circumstances. And so, it doesn't suffice for them to discover a new technique or to improve their shots. Rather, the core challenge of the third selection requires them to recalibrate their entire worldview. I'll start with Reo this time. For him, if I'd identify his core shortcoming up to this point in the story, it's that he takes his wealth and privilege for granted. The reason why Reo has such difficulties accepting that Nagi left him behind is because he's always considered Nagi as his property, as his treasure. And so, he faces off against Isagi in the second selection to reclaim what he perceives to be rightfully his. I can't go into detail about this here, but this will definitely be a topic for another day. That brings us to the third selection, where he's finally forced to grapple with the reality that he no longer has anything to offer for Nagi. At last, he internalizes what it means to not get what you want. This is the realization that upends his entire worldview. If you truly want something that's out of your reach, you must be willing to cast aside all your pride and privilege and change every fiber of your being. Meaning, in Reo's case, to stop chasing after Nagi and become someone who Nagi wants to chase after instead. That's Reo's way of adapting, and in doing so, he's figurized by the creature that best represents change in the animal kingdom. Nevertheless, his ultimate loss proves that Reo's transformation is not quite enough. And to understand that, we need to return once more to Ego's speech about assertion and coexistence. In particular, he sets out a final goal for the Blue Lock candidates to truly prove themselves worthy for the Blue Lock 11. not just to make themselves irreplaceable to their team, but to surpass the top 6, to treat them as stepping stones on the path to world's best. And this is the exact domain where Reo Mikage's copycat playstyle falls short. It's a potent ability, but one that'll never outshine the original. That's why, in the end, Reo can neither offer Nagi what he seeks, nor makes his way onto the Blue Lock 11 starting lineup. Let's return to Isagi now. As I said earlier, Rin and Shidou both rely on high-level solo plays, to the extent that they even at times actively hinder each other. This moment gives Isagi the first key to assert his value. He can form the connective tissue between his various teammates, between Blue Lock star strikers, but also link up Nanase and Hiyori. At this point, Isagi has cleared the first hurdle of the third selection. He has found a way to assert himself and coexist within a new environment. Yet, this still doesn't suffice for someone aiming to become the world's best. I want to also add in something quick about the overall team dynamic here. On the one hand, Isagi's team is rife with internal conflict, to the point that it threatens their ability to function properly at all. But interestingly enough, the strife between Rin and Shidou is contrasted with the start of the match, where Isagi experiences the most wholesome, uplifting moment in his entire time in Blue Lock. Right from the onset, Isagi lays witness to an alternative way of interacting with people and viewing the world. And that, I think, feeds into the biggest development of the arc. Towards the end of the arc, Isagi experiences a crucial moment of growth by learning to act on reflex. And what's really important here is the way this is framed. When Hiyori suggests relying on his reflexes, he presents this as a completely different cognitive process, an alternative paradigm to act upon his sensory perception. Obeying his reflexes means entering a state of being that opens up a world of feeling and sensation. Now, circling back to his loss in the 4v4, Rin tells Isagi that he fell short because of his flawed preconceptions. And in my view, this applies to more than just luck. As Isagi himself admits, he needs to refigure his approach from the ground up if he wants a shot at beating Rin. And that's exactly what he does to clear the third selection. In the ultimate act of adaptation, he flips all assumptions about his playstyle on their heads and surpasses Blue Lock's top 2 strikers in the process. Adding to that, it jumped out to me that each of Isagi's breakthroughs in the arc can be viewed in light of the juxtaposition between Rin's and Shidou's playstyles. The first one sees Isagi relying on his ability to read the field and draw out the best in his teammates, showing a similarity between his and Rin's approaches. But then, he scores the winning goal by relying on his instincts, in a move more akin to those of Shidou. So in a sense, Isagi ultimately comes out on top because he subsumed the greatest qualities of Blue Lock's top strikers and combined them into a package that brought them in harmony. That's surpassing the top 6 right there. And so, it's no wonder that he passed the third selection with flying colours and earned himself a crucial spot on the Blue Lock 11. Anyways, that's it for me, but definitely let me know your thoughts on the third selection in the comments. And if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth Blue Lock analysis every other week, or even supporting me on Patreon to get my weekly thoughts on the new Blue Lock chapter. I also put out a teaser for this video a few days early for my patrons, and I'll try doing that a bit more going forward. That brings me to my most generous donors, my €10 patrons, Patricia and Pat, Orangey Legend, and Trishla the Best Boy, who are greatly helping make my custom thumbnail artwork possible. Thanks a mil. I really appreciate your support. So, until next time, Slán go fóill.